We'll call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Bob?
Here.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jay?
Here.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mark?
Here.
John?
Here.
Kurt?
Present.
Okay, we have a full quorum today with Assembly Member Walhuter participating by phone. And now it's time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand and say the pledge with us? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, that brings us to item 3 on the agenda, and it's approval of minutes. We're looking for approval of the meeting minutes from February 2nd of 2015. I'll entertain a motion to that.
I'll move. Second.
Been moved by Member Lagadaka, seconded by Member Lynn to approve the minutes from the regular assembly meeting of February 2nd, 2015. If I hear no changes, I'll consider them approved. Okay. The next meeting minutes we're looking for approval on is the February 6, 2015 special meeting. We'll entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Greger to approve those meeting minutes. Any changes? It looks like they're approved as well. That brings us to item 4, amendment and approval of the meeting agenda for today. Is there a motion to approve or amend these minutes?
Mr. Mayor, could we move a presentation up to the forward into this agenda early on here?
Sure.
As a people.
What would you like to move up?
Recognition.
A recognition.
Okay, under council discussion, I think we'll move recognitions up. So is that all right with all the other assembly members?
Yes, and
that?
I would like to add swearing in of our new city clerk, our
Okay.
borough clerk.
So we have approval to move the first thing up under recognitions up, and as well as move the swearing in of our new borough clerk. So everybody in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any other amendments to today's meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor of today's meeting minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So before we go any farther, let's do the swearing in of our new clerk first. New borough clerk is going to be Debbie Thompson, and she's going to be replacing Kathy over here.
Here. Please raise your right hand. You do solemnly affirm that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Alaska, and the ordinances of the Petersburg Borough, and that you will faithfully, honestly, and impartially perform the duties of borough clerk to the best of your ability.
I do.
Very good. It's official. And now we have recognitions. I believe there is a recognition of Officer Kerr today. Is that what we have going? So Kelly, were you going to do that, please?
Thank you.
And who else had a recognition?
Sorry for everyone. Come up.
I'd like to recognize Sergeant Kerr for 2 successful life-saving efforts over about the last 60 days. And I've got a little deal I'll read for you here. On October 28, 2014, Sergeant James Kerr and Officer Ben King responded to a report of a suicidal male locked in a restroom. On arrival, Sergeant Kerr forced the door open and found the subject unconscious and not breathing. Further, he noticed signs of illicit drug use. Sergeant Kerr performed rescue breathing on the subject, who regained consciousness. The subject was transported to Petersburg Medical Center for further treatment and has since recovered. And again on January 8, 2015, Sergeant Kerr and another officer responded to a person that was reported to have fallen. Upon arrival, Sergeant Kerr found the subject unconscious and not breathing. He observed the subject had turned blue and also noticed items suggesting illicit drug use. Again, Sergeant Kerr performed rescue breathing for several minutes until he was relieved by medical personnel who took over treatment. Subject later regained consciousness and was transported to the medical center for further treatment and has since recovered. Sergeant Kerr placed himself at risk by performing rescue breathing on 2 subjects who were involved in illicit intravenous drug use. Both individuals would have likely died had it not been for his quick, decisive, and professionally administered action. As a token of our appreciation of his dedication to the citizens of Petersburg, it's my pleasure to present this plaque to him for his successful life-saving efforts.
Thank you, Sergeant, for your dedication to your job.
Thank you.
Mr. Loesch?
Presentation like to make?
Sure. Can you please step forward and, or you can do it where the other recognitions took place and swearing in, whatever you like.
We have a recognition for outgoing clerk, Kathy O'Leary.
Make it come out.
That's the exact reaction I thought I would get.
You're not getting in violation of anything, are you?
The plaque reads in appreciation to Kathy O'Rear, City Clerk and Petersburg Borough Clerk, August 7, 2000 to March 31, 2015, for professional and exemplary work on behalf of the citizens of this community by maintaining and distributing public information and records in accordance with the Alaska Open Meetings Act and public record statutes, presented on the 2nd day of March 2015 by the publishers of the Petersburg Pilot.
Well-deserved reward, no doubt. Not any more recognitions before we move on. Any of the staff have any recognitions? Seeing no hands going up, we'll move forward. That brings us to public hearings and bid awards. First item there is a community discussion which has been ongoing on local control / regulations of the new marijuana legalization law. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to talk to that? If we're going to have a resolution before us later in the meeting, do we have to form a resolution to be able to appoint a committee? And there's 16 names now of people that want to be on the committee from the public and 2 assembly members. So if no one from the public wants to make any comments at this time, we'll have our discussion on it later. I see no one interested, so we'll move on. Public hearing on ordinance 2015-14, an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2015 budget for known changes. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to talk on ordinance 2015-04 in a public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing. The next item on the under public hearings and bid awards is a public library landscaping project bid award. I would entertain a motion to approve this bid award. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Greger to approve this landscaping bid award. Discussion. And we could briefly go, John.
Yeah, this concerns me a little because knowing the budget crunch we're in, and it's going to be getting much worse, I have a hard time spending $200,000 on landscaping. If it was going for some long-term hardware for the library, or something that we wouldn't have to spend money on later because we're using this now, I'd be more in favor of it. And any donated monies or equipment, I have no problem with at all. But money's coming from that state grant or from the bond we took, I'd rather see, like I said, go to some hardware or something permanent, because we're going to have trouble keeping the lights on in a few years, and having $200,000 landscaping just doesn't seem right at this time.
Okay. Any other discussion on this bid award for the library landscaping? Kurt, can you hear us all right?
Yeah, you're just fine there, Mark.
Okay, just want to touch bases with you every once in a while.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Nancy?
It's my understanding these funds are already part of the contract. The library, this isn't something that's coming fresh out of the budget.
No, Tara, could you explain where the funding is going to come from for
Sure,
this?
there's two sources of funding for the
Can you,
landscape.
I don't know that the, there
sorry.
you go. Thank you, Liz.
There's two sources of funding for the library landscaping. The first is a state legislative grant, which is earmarked for the public library. And the second source are private donations from individuals and businesses in the community.
Okay, does that explain where that, your question, Nancy?
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah, and the lowest bid came in at higher than the money we had, so they negotiated with the lowest bidder and got them down to the level that we had funding for. And it sounds to me like it's going to be mainly just rock work and some drainage and stuff that would definitely clean up the yard at the library. Cindy?
If I may, in conversations with some of the library staff, I believe the idea was to hardscape it so that it would save money. They wouldn't have to go in and mow the grass and tend the vegetation. So long term, this is supposed to be a less expensive option than to have to maintain living landscaping.
There will actually be plants on the site, but we have designed the entire site as well as the plantings to be as low maintenance as we can over the long term, yeah.
Okay, any other discussion? If there's none, will the clerk call the roll?
John,
No.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes. Okay, the bid award for the public library landscaping project is approved 6-1, with member Haverlick voting no, and it'll be awarded to Reed Brothers Construction. Okay. Visitors' views related to the agenda today. Is there anybody in the audience that has views related to items on today's agenda that would like to talk about it? Yes. Can you step to the microphone, who you represent, please?
My name is Wes Davis. I'm with Ruger's Trucking. We're currently doing the Blue Bag program. Besides the obvious fact I'd like to keep my job, I still don't believe the cart-based system's a good fit for our city right now. The sanitation department put out a survey. 104 people took it. 66 of those people said they wouldn't mind having cans. And majority of a weekend, we got 300 people on a petition saying, leave the program the same, don't spend the money for the new equipment. So I don't think that survey was accurate. When it was first brought to my attention, they said, we're just doing what the public wants. But I don't believe that's what the public wants. I still think that the cart-based system is going to hinder our recycling rate. We have, people with steep driveways. For example, Papsky's Landing, those people are dragging their carts all the way down the road, out to the main road. If I lived there, I certainly wouldn't, on a separate day, drag my cart all the way out to the end, 96-gallon cart to recycle. So I still think it's going to have some negative effects overall. When we lived down south and we had, a cart-based system, everybody has a 30-foot paved driveway on a slope right down to the curb. It was real simple. All the cans are stacked right behind everybody's gates. But there was still someone from Waste Management would drive around, randomly open up the bins and check if they got what they're supposed to have in them. Because human nature is, over time, they're just going to start throwing stuff in there. For example, people throwing scrap metal. Oh, it's recyclable. We throw scrap metal in there. But that's not what our commingle program is for. It's not for scrap metal, things like that. I mean, I've had people put tennis shoes because they have rubber soles on them in there. People put a computer in there, So I think that over time, cart-based system is going to encourage that kind of behavior, where we might have issues with our handler down south saying, hey, we're spending too much time picking stuff out of here that's, that we're paying for. I still think it's irresponsible, to spend that kind of money on that system. the borough's already spending over $500,000 on new equipment for this year, upcoming budget as it is right now. Tacking another 210 on top of it, when our state's in financial crisis, we can already feel the crunch trickling down to us. It doesn't seem wise. I guess I got a couple quick questions for Carl real quick to clarify something. We had last meeting, we was $66,000 in savings was put out, per year, roughly the cost difference. Were those figures mainly just based on, the purchase price of the vehicles, purchase price of the cans, and versus our contract?
That figure comes from comparison between expenses if we went with continuing your contract versus going to buying a truck and getting carts. It's a comparison between the expenses that we see on an annual basis.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'd like to know, I don't want to lead anybody astray, so I'd like to know do you have fuel, maintenance, insurance, all that stuff included in those expenses?
Yes, I do.
For the big truck?
Yes.
Do you have the cost of someone picking up commercial cardboard in that?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I want to know. I didn't want to get up here and say the opposite without clarifying that first. I think there's a lot of different ways we can look at the blue bags. There's got to be ways we can save money on them. I've seen, at least like probably 4 different kinds of bags come through here. Purchasing one kind of bag that works for everybody. In a bulk order, we know what we need. I've talked to a lot of residents that said they wouldn't mind just using their own bags. It's just as recyclable as the blue bags. Yeah, so there's just lots of different ways, we can have some discussions and sit down and figure out the best way to maybe cut the cost for the city for the blue bags itself. Another question for all of us in the room, if you have a blue card, are you going to recycle more? My answer is no. But if your answer is yes, then what's stopping you from recycling more now? I don't see why a cart would make you put more in it. Our recycle rate's not where it should be yet. We are hoping to be up to 30% by now. We're at, 16%. That's pretty much it. It's pretty cut and dry to spend that kind of money for a program that's not quite there yet. When the people I've talked to said that if they go to carts, they're going to quit the program. They don't want to recycle. It's too much of an inconvenience. Convenience is a big part of the blue bag program. It's working well, but I know for a fact that there's going to be a lot less people recycling with blue cans. And then what's going to happen? The city's going to have a expensive truck sitting there, all these cans sitting there that, and the recycle rate's still low. I say we need to give it some more time, keep, talking to the public, make them aware of what they can recycle, what they can't, build the program, let's get it up to 30%, and continue discussions at another year. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And this is, I think, what Mr. Davis is talking about is on this year's budget under the sanitation department. The borough's proposing buying a new vehicle and some cans, and this is the first reading today that we're going to vote on. The next meeting will be the second reading, and will also be a public hearing. So people that are interested and have an opinion on this, that will be your time to come and comment. Send letters, and they will be read into the record or show up at the meeting on the 16th, I believe it is, and we'll discuss it then. So thank you. Any questions of Mr. Davis? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So any other visitors with views related to today's agenda in the audience? Okay, we're gonna, Matt Briner was his hand first, Larson. We'll
Hi.
State your
Hey,
name
guys.
and who you represent, please.
I'm Matt Briner. I'm Vice President of Petersburg Little League. I want to talk a little bit about the resolution 2015-04, the transferring of the skate park into Little League. We'd like to if it works out throughout the community, we'd like to take that facility and make it into an enclosed batting cage eventually. You know, anywhere from year to year, we get anywhere from 90 to up to 200 kids in our Little League programs. And it would be nice to have another facility where they can utilize hitting cages and pitching in an enclosed area. Right now, as the skate park sits, being up there quite a bit, that facility, as far as I see, doesn't get utilized that often. It'd be nice to get an opportunity to let a bigger user group utilize that area. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We'd like to see, and it's something that could happen this year. You know, as far as money goes for cages and cable systems and stuff like that, Little League already has, you know, a lot of the cable system and stuff like that, because we put the netting up on the big fields, and as far as nets cost, it's minimal. So we have artificial turf that we got from Juneau's football field, so we can put that down, and we want to do that also with the cages that are up there right now. We just need a little bit of dirt or sand or something to level things out. So we want to continue to make that field grow without trying to have the city have to do a lot of the legwork. So.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Any
You bet.
questions of Matt by the Assembly? Thank you, Matt.
You bet.
Debbie?
I just wanted to clarify, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, the public hearing for the known changes of the budget, which has to do with the recycling contract, is actually today. You already read it.
Oh, so this is the...
Today's the second reading, and the public hearing was
Okay,
supposed
you're
to
right.
be today, and no
Okay.
one spoke.
I stand corrected, so
But if there's someone here that wants to
we'll
speak.
be on to our third reading at the next meeting. then.
Correct,
Okay.
yes, okay.
Thank you for the correction. That's important. Okay, any other visitors with views related to the agenda? Lars, can you please step to the microphone and state your name and who you represent? Right over here where Mr. Briner just was.
My name's Lars. Most of you know me. I really don't represent anybody, but I was listening on the radio, and I was listening to your thing about the landscaping the library. I just cannot understand how that can cost $200,000. I've done a little bit of that. I mean, $100,000 has been way too much money. And I don't know if I'm late speaking on it, but I just don't see how you can justify spending that kind of money on that. And I don't know how politics works. I just want to give my opinion.
Well, thanks for your public input, but we've already
I know it's
passed the
too
middle
late.
word, so yeah. But
It just seems so absurd, 200 grand for landscaping.
okay, thank you. Any other visitors' views related to today's agenda? Okay, now I'll backtrack a little bit just to make sure we cover this. We're still under public hearing and bid awards. Is there anybody that would like to talk under public hearing on ordinance 2015-04, an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2015 budget for known changes? Okay, seeing none, that public hearing is closed. Thanks, Debbie. Any other visitors' views related to today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Visitors' views unrelated to today's agenda. Any visitors' views on items not presented on our agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. Board, commission, and committee reports. Now we have a report from presentation by Joel Paisner and Trey Atkinson from SEPA. Joel is the legal counsel and Trey is the CEO of SEPA, and this is in regards to bonding. So you guys have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to speak a couple of things today. Just going to give you a brief update on the SWAN project and where that's at, and then discuss some financing things we're working on. And just to help put things in context a little bit, and I'll call Joel up here in just a little while to kind of end the presentation. So. As far as who SEPA is, if you're not familiar with our organization, we are your Generation and Transmission Joint Action Agency. You all should have a handout there that's basically some PowerPoint slides. The JAA is governed by municipal appointed board members from our 3-member communities. The JAA owns the Tyee and Swan Lake hydroelectric projects, providing wholesale power and energy to the municipalities of Ketchikan, Wrangell, and Petersburg. The JAA also owns, operates, and maintains the transmission lines linking those communities together, approximately 175 miles of line and 14 miles of submarine cable. SEPA evolved out of the 4-dam power pool during restructuring. The JAA provides bundled services, including scheduling, planning, engineering, O&M, project development, water management, and so forth. So with regard to the Swan Lake Reservoir Expansion Project, for those that you aren't familiar with that, I do put out a community flyer about quarterly. Hopefully that's giving you a little insight as the project's moved along. The dam's 174 feet tall, 430 feet wide, and it has a spillway slot in it that's 15 feet high and 100 feet wide. And essentially the project is to fill that spillway slot, be able to raise the reservoir 15 feet. It gives us an extra 25% active storage in that reservoir, so pretty good bang for the buck with small modifications. And after we fill the spillway slot, we also have to make some adjustments to the parapet wall and also raise some equipment up in the intake structure. So the current status is, and we completed all the environmental studies here a while back, filed our non-capacity license amendment last year. We're expecting to get a response on that here in the next month or two, hopefully. Design's at about 30% now, and we've been doing some extensive modeling. We've actually changed our design and simplified it from the original Obermeyer design. So simpler, easier to install, easier to construct, and easier to maintain. So I think it's going to help lower the overall cost of the project, hopefully by a couple of $1 million. And we're still on track for construction in 2016. So this is a pretty fast-track project. We were actually able to cut about a year off of our permitting process just by being proactive and engaging the agencies a little bit early. So project benefits, what's this do? First of all, it provides more energy. It allows us to capture the spill. We spilled for several months this year, and once that spill goes over the dam, it's energy lost forever. This particular project is estimated to save us up to 12,000 megawatt hours a year, and on average about 7,500. What's that mean in terms of, say, diesel mitigation? That would be approximately the same amount as burning 800,000 gallons of diesel for diesel generation. And on the good side, it also is about 8 million pounds of CO2 that wouldn't be going in the atmosphere if you burn that diesel. So, as previously mentioned, it adds about 25% to the storage of Swan. It also allows us to keep higher head in the reservoirs. And for those of you familiar with that, actually, the water that's in the reservoir, we end up using more efficiently. You get more energy out of that water with the higher head. And that'll benefit at both Tyee and Swan. Another real important aspect of this project is Swan is essentially Petersburg and Wrangell's long-term backup if something were ever to happen at Tyee. If we had a big transformer failure or something there and we were still able to push power up through the intertie, then that would be able to feed you guys. So I think that's probably the biggest risk mitigation factor. It also supports integration of other non-dispatchable renewables, and what I mean by non-dispatchable are types that aren't always on, or and a good example that would be like wind, and also run-of-river hydro that doesn't have any storage, so when the water's flowing down you have to capture it or you lose it. This allows us to capture it when it is there and then store that in the reservoir. Most importantly, it won't raise the wholesale power rate. So that's just my quick update on the Swan portion of the presentation. I encourage anybody who has any questions with regard to what I'm talking about today to call our office or look at our website. We have a ton of information on there. We redid our website last year. It's completely revamped, and hopefully it's a lot more user-friendly. Any questions I can field on the Swan project?
Any questions of Trey? John?
Yes, sir.
This isn't directly related to Swan, but with the lack of snowpack this year, are we going to have problems this summer?
I wish that my crystal ball was crystal clear, but what I can tell you right now, our reservoirs are pretty full, which is good, and it's really going to depend. We don't have hardly any snowpack. It's not even worth going up and measuring at this point. We may get some snow a little later on in the season here. If it gets cold, we could have a storm coming and dump a couple feet. So it's really going to depend on inflows later in the year with rain. Yeah. So I don't have better news than that one, but that's what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bob, you have a question?
Yeah, is there an intent in the longer run then, when you get the additional capacity, to increase the turbine capacity or change your turbines there or anything?
None at Swan, and as some people may recall, we do have a third base tie that we could install a third turbine in that. That would probably coincide with the relicensing effort that would occur with Tyee, which is around 2030, 31 in that time. We'll start that relicensing effort probably 5 to 7 years before the expiration, but that's when that would more than likely occur.
About how much more power would that provide? Just
well, the turbines that are right now, they're rated together at about 25 MVA, but some, about 12 megawatts. And so you probably just put a third one in the same size, or you may downsize it, just depending on your needs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Trey in the Assembly?
So,
thanks for that, Trey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll roll forward and talk about electric revenue and refunding bonds 2015. I know everybody thinks bonds is an extremely exciting topic, so I'm going to keep it pretty brief. So, why are we talking about bonds today? First of all, SEPA has some debt that we have an opportunity to refinance, and probably more importantly, interest rates in the bond market are probably the cheapest they've been in 40 years. I mean, it's just remarkable how low they are. And we have some refinancing capability. Our 2009 bonds had an early refunding clause for a portion of them, and that was we were eligible for that in June 2014. And at that time, I advised our board to hold off on that for a little while to see where Swan came in, so we could bundle those two efforts for bonding together. And of course, the Swan Lake is the second portion of that. So with our existing 2009 electric revenue bonds, we've got one tranche that's $4.77 million that's eligible for early refunding. And that current interest rate on that's about 5.37%. And our total outstanding debt's about 13.4, so it kind of gives you an idea of how big that tranche is out of that. And then for additional funds for Swan right now, we're looking at approximately $7 million. I'm hoping that I can ratchet that back a little bit, but right now we're looking, that's our goal for $7 million of new money coming into the system. And for those of you that weren't following it, we did get another grant last year for Swan, $3.32 million, and so we've got a total of about $3.9 million from the state through DCCD. So I'm going to ask Joel, Mr. Paisner's our legal counsel, to come up and kind of tell you where we're at in the process and why we're here today, just to kind of set the wheels in motion for the bonding effort. There are some things we need help with from the city and borough of Petersburg. So thank you.
Thank you, Joel Paisner, and I'm counsel to SEPA. And I just want to run through a couple things. Really, this is just nuts and bolts about the bond issuance. If you have any questions about this, feel free to ask away. But basically, we've had to pull a team together, a bond counsel, financial advisor, underwriter, to help us sell the bonds in the market. And as Trey said, the interest rates that we're looking at now we're getting probably saving about 2 percentage points on interest rates. So the rates are really, really favorable, and that's why we're here doing this now, because it'll save the agency money and keep the rates stable, allow us to do this project going forward, and hopefully not impact the wholesale power rate. And the documents, what we really need from you is we need you to approve the transaction in a way that you let someone sign on behalf of each member utility, in this case the Petersburg Borough, a variety of documents that we're amending. And I've prepared a list in the materials here of what we're going to ask to be amended, the indenture and subordination agreement, a couple other technical agreements. But basically, there's really no changes to the underlying documentation. All the authority that the city at the time, the borough now, granted SEPA, the Joint Action Agency, back in 2009 during the restructuring has been granted already. We have all that authority. There's just some minor technical changes to those documents to include the new money, essentially. And we're not asking for, if anyone was around back in 2009, we had a new power sales agreement, we had new bylaws, things like that. There's no changes to those documents. So it's really much more of a technical change that we'll put before you. We need your city attorney to give a couple technical opinions about the laws and the authority of the assembly, and really that's it. So our schedule on page 12 of the outline, I put a schedule together for you. We're not asking for you to do anything today. This is just kind of a heads up. You're going to get a bunch of documents in front of you. We're probably recommend that you have someone like Steve or your mayor granted the authority to sign them, so we don't have to get every single one of you in a room or variety of rooms. But we're presenting today to you. We're going to the city of Ketchikan on Thursday evening and next week to Wrangell. Trey and I then go down to the Bay Area to go to a ratings agency presentation, Standard & Poor's. They actually rate the bonds. That has the biggest effect on the interest rate we'll pay. They rated our bonds last time, and we did okay. We're hoping for good success this time. We're looking at final pricing and selling of the bonds mid to late April, and then closing and getting access to the funds by the end of April, beginning of May. So really the push will come later, and that's really all it is. I mean, it's pretty technical in terms of what we need you to do. So thanks for having us.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Mr. Paisner? John?
Yes, does this change our liability in any way from the way it is now?
No, it shouldn't, no. I guess the only pause I have there is I'm not quite sure what you mean by liability in terms of cost or
exposure.
risk. No, it's all the same. It's absolutely the same. I mean, the agency's taking on a little bit more debt, but that's the only thing. Technically, I mean, in terms of legal risk to the member utilities, no, there's no additional legal risk to you at all.
Okay, thank you.
I got a question similar to that. Well, I assume we're going to send it to our council. That's one of the questions I'd like to see us, if that increases our risk, particularly on the default side, if it ever came about, and what that would do. If we could ask, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Any other questions? Cindy?
I just have one. Is there a limit of debt that SEPA can incur, and how close, actually two questions, how close are we to that limit if there is one?
There's no legal, it's not like the assembly here, a municipality where there's a bar to that. I mean, there's some practical limitations about our assets that the agency owns and how much you can go out there on the market, but there's no legal limitation to that. I mean, obviously, if we take on debt, we have to be able to pay it off. And so that's the limitation, but there's no legal bar to that, like mill rate or that you get up against on a local municipal level. So there's nothing similar to that. And also, I mean, just to respond a little bit to your question about what the liability is for each of the member utilities. I mean, basically, what's really nice about the structure of SEPA is that it's completely separate from the member utilities. There's no obligation for you to pay any of the debt. You have to, if you take our power, you have to pay for it. But this is not, in utility financing, there's something called take or pay. This is not a take or pay contract. It's never been a take or pay contract. And I think that has offered each of our member utilities a huge benefit. There's a lot of protection there for you individually. So, and I'm happy to talk to your council about that too. So,
any other questions, Mr. Paisner? Seeing none, thank you.
Thanks very much.
We'll be in touch. Okay, next item on the agenda is consent agenda. I don't see any items listed there, so we'll move on to reports of other officers. And didn't have a published mayor's report, but I was just going to give a brief report of upcoming meetings and then our trips to Juneau and Washington, D.C. And Cindy or Steve could add in whenever they'd like. But the next meeting we have scheduled is there's a meeting on the 9th with the Hospital Board Assembly, a joint meeting which is required by charter every year. So that's going to be next Monday the 9th at 6 p.m. And then on the 10th there's a meeting from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. and that is about the cake access. That will be presented by Brian Wacker. He's a private engineer, public engineer from Robert Pacia, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Associates. At that meeting there will be people present from the Forest Service, Alaska Department of Transportation and Federal Highways, and whoever from the public would like to participate. So that's next Tuesday from 6 to 8. And our next assembly meeting is on the 2nd, and that's at 7 in the evening. 15th. This is a man. It's March, right?
Yes. Monday, right? 16th?
Monday the 16th. Isn't that what I said?
No.
Maybe it's the cough drop. I've got a cold. But I meant 16th. That's one thing I got. That's my mayor's report from Washington, D.C. and the traveling in the metro. I got must be where I picked it up. Anyway, the Juneau trip. There is a lot of talk about this state of the financial crisis and the from the oil funding. When we were up there 2 weeks ago, a week before last, there was one thing in particular that would affect us is the funding for the community jails. We normally get, last year we got right around $300,000, I believe. It was $10 million for all the 15 jails around the state, and they totally took it out, Department of Corrections did. So we met with them, and there was a lot of pushback from all the other communities, and they put $7 million back in, and what they suggested was that we would get 2011 levels for funding, which would bring us down to like $202,000, and how we're going to fill that gap is an unknown, but that could be taken out by the legislature, just like the ferry money was taken out, put back in, and the legislature's cutting it again. So it's kind of a moving target. I personally don't see that we have to be too concerned with this year's budget, since we have the money and it's a balanced budget, but that's just my opinion. But in the future, it's not going to be a pretty picture. Sorry to bring the news, but I think we're expecting that. Profit sharing is another one. There was $60 million. Later in today's agenda, we're going to talk about supporting the governor's $57 million he wants to put in the budget for revenue sharing. But what the legislature does with that is still up in the air. Ferry funding, like I talked about, it's going to be pretty sad, I think. DC, just going to go over kind of the agenda and who we met with down there. The first thing on our meeting, the top priority, we deemed it the top priority, was secure rural schools. The money we get there. We met with Senator Murkowski, Senator Sullivan, and Representative Young. They sounded optimistic that there might be funding for retroactively funding the 2014 year, if I remember right, and then 2015 and on, it could be ratcheted down. And the way it's proposed right now, instead of us getting the money we'd get, what would we get, 9,000, Steve? So
instead of roughly 1.3 million, we getting 9,000.
So it's big numbers. And that's the secure rural schools part of it. PILT, that's been funded. So, for now, that's more of a nationwide thing, payment in lieu of taxes on federal land within your jurisdiction. South Harbor dredging, that was kind of encouraging. We went and talked to Steve Kopecki. He's with the Pacific Ocean Division of the integration team from the Corps of Engineers. Our lobbyist was even surprised when we were sitting in on that meeting because there wasn't any funding, supposedly. But now there is funding that's been built up for Section 107 projects, and dredging of our South Harbor would possibly qualify for that. So we have to go through the program. First step is come up with a fact sheet, brief description, the way I understood it, of what the job's going to be, and then submit it to the Alaska Division of the Corps. Our lobbyist is supposed to call them today if he didn't last week, and Steve Kopecki was going to contact them as well. So that's we'll just see how that progresses. British Columbia mining, the transboundary rivers, there was some, which surprised me, there was some positive feelings that there were going to be some talks with the Canadian government, with the International Joint Commission, but we'll see how that goes. But then when I get back, I read in the news that the Lieutenant Governor is chairing a committee for the state that's going to talk with the Canadian government. So hopefully that works, so we have more control over, or at least input on the mining and tailing dams up the river. On the fisheries note, the EPA commercial fishing vessel incidental discharge, we've managed to get a 3-year moratorium on that, and hopefully before next year, when Senator Boxer, is that when her term ends, is working with our senators, there will be a permanent fix, and that would require water that runs off the deck of a boat, I believe under 80 feet, to be treated, and that would affect our fishing fleet dramatically. There was some talk about genetically modified salmon, not supporting that. National Marine Monuments, don't really like the idea of the governor or the president being able to just determine that all the way around the Aleutians is now a monument and you can't fish there, so that was interesting. Coast Guard reorganization, didn't really get a straight answer, but I believe it's Congressman Young is on the Coast Guard committee, and he was going to ask them for an answer whether we would lose our 110-foot cutter when they transfer into the 152-foot vessels. Swan Lake hydropower, we were in a meeting with Senator Sullivan, and that got kind of short. He was 45 minutes behind schedule, but it worked out, and as we were leaving the room, the Secretary of Energy was his next person in line, so Senator Sullivan asked if we wanted to be introduced to him, and we didn't see why not. So we met the gentleman, I can't remember his name, but had a chance to put in a plug for making it so our hydro in Southeast especially is considered green energy. And he listened, and so we'll see what goes from there, the Secretary of Energy. And that's about all I have to report from the Washington, D.C. and the Juneau trips, unless Steve and Kathy want to, or Steve and Cindy want to add something to it.
Just on the Swan Lake or the hydro issue, the Secretary mentioned a proposal they're trying to get through that actually funds lake tap and run-of-the-river smaller hydro type projects. Our lobbyist was unaware of that as well, and they're trying to look into the details on it. So that was encouraging news. We run up against this all the time. When you mention hydro, people think lower 48 Hoover Dam, and immediately you have a huge pushback from lots of environmental groups against use of hydro. The stuff that we do here isn't like that at all, and maybe gaining some traction on having them look at hydro in a less one big bucket and separating it out, which would be helpful. So.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Cindy, if you want to talk about your timber meeting you attended?
Yeah, I was able to attend the Senate meeting on the first run of the Forest Service budget, and the Chief of the Forest Service, Tom Tidwell, was there, as well as the meeting was run by Senator Lisa Murkowski. One of the interesting things that came out, every year when fire season hits, the Forest Service typically gets to a point where fire expenditures are high enough that they start stealing from budgets for other programs to pay for firefighting. And the Chief of the Forest Service was recommending that because fire incidence has increased and the fires are getting bigger, and it's something that we know is going to happen every year, that they were making the recommendation that instead of stealing from their own budget, that money come from designated emergency funds, and I'm saying the wrong name for the fund, but that seems to be a rational approach to trying to maintain a Forest Service budget that's manageable without having to interrupt contracts and deal with end-of-season changes. Another thing that the senator really strongly emphasized with the chief of the Forest Service was her desire to see the Tongass increase its timber harvest, and that ties in with the secure rural schools issue. The chief was not able to give very many specifics, and there was a little bit of talk about state forestry's ability to log versus the Forest Service, and I think you can draw some conclusions from that, but it was definitely a focus of hers. And overall, pretty interesting. I mean, there were a couple other issues that came up during our meetings. There was a lot of talk about Alaska not having a designated transportation fund that goes specifically for transportation. The tax money that's collected goes to the general fund, and so that puts us in a little tougher spot as in terms of maintaining our infrastructure, trying to advocate for those dollars. And the Association of Counties was also advocating that local governments have more of a voice in helping plan transportation for their states. So I thought that was interesting. And the other thing that popped up was the discussion about trying to be able to collect tax on internet sales that would be a potential source of revenue for local governments as well.
Okay, thanks. So I see a red light flashing on the phone. You still there, Kurt? Transferring.
Roger that, Mark.
Okay. I don't understand this phone system. Right, you've been awful quiet.
Oh, it's been really fascinating to listen.
Okay. It was actually a real interesting trip back to Washington, D.C., and I think it was well worth the time, and it should happen in the future, in my opinion. Last time was over 9 years ago, so the lobbyists seem to think that was a little bit long, kind of lose connection with what's going on back there. So we'll see what happens down the road. You have anything else to report, Steve? You're next on the agenda. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Cindy, you have something else to? Oh, take a break. We'll take a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 1 o'clock. I guess that's 8 minutes. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. We're just starting unfinished business. The first item under unfinished business is ordinance 2015-01, an ordinance providing for a joint Thomas Bay Power Advisory Committee with Wrangell. It's the short title. This is the third and final reading. I'll entertain a motion to adopt that ordinance in its third reading. Is there a second? Okay, moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Lagodakis to adopt ordinance 2015-01 in its final reading. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimous. Ordinance 2015-01 is adopted. Okay, next item is ordinance 2015-04, an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2015 budget for known changes. This is the second reading. I'll entertain a motion to adopt that ordinance.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Lagodakis to adopt ordinance 2015-04 in its second reading. Discussion?
Hey, Mark. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Kurt.
This is Kurt. Hey, I'm trying to refresh my memory here, and I'm kind of having a hard time with all this sun in my eyes here. But anyway, did Carl say that there was going to be an increase in garbage rate pickups if we didn't approve of another recycling program? Maybe we ask that question for Carl?
Sure, did you hear that, Carl?
I'm not sure. What was the question?
Your question is if we're going to incur an increase in garbage collection if we don't go to the can method? Was that your question, or did I misunderstand it?
No, that's correct.
Okay, yes, Mr. Mayor, the answer is yes. Even though with the large capital expense of a truck and the carts, the annual expenses of the collection contract outweigh the amortization of those capital costs. So we have rate increases in our rate schedule in the ordinance right now, or in the code book right now, but to achieve the same levels of revenue that we need to produce reserves in the sanitation fund equal to the cart-based system, we'll have to raise rates.
Did you get the answer, Kurt?
I kind of did. So what was the amount of the increase going to be, Mark, if we decided not to go with the blue can recycling program?
He didn't give it, but we can ask. What would the amount be, Carl, of the increase?
I haven't figured that out yet.
We don't have that number, Kurt.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's kind of where okay, that was just a question that I needed to have answered there. You know, I'm kind of writing the fence through. So, okay, well, thank you.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, I have a question for Carl there. On the sanitation fund on the next year's budget, we've shown that for 6 months, if we had 6 month operating expenses, which is what we want to have, we'd have $624,000. We're setting, as of the 2014, we were setting at $307,000 is what we show. One of the assembly members said that it looks like we're going to need to raise rates no matter which way we go in order to get back. When I went back and looked at your charts under the various scenarios, we were going out by 2020, and I think the best scenario shows you getting it back at $543,000 on those. The question I guess I have is that no matter what, which way we go, if we're going to get back to what we need for operating 6 months operating expenses, we're still going to have to raise rates. Am I wrong or right, or am I thinking?
It depends on how long you want it to take, because I'm basically planning on allowing our current rate increases. We've got 2% increases scheduled until 2018 in the code right now, and I'm planning for those to take effect and to get us where we need to be. It would be a horrendous increase to get us to that operating reserve level in 1 year. I don't think anybody would want to see that. I wouldn't want to put that proposal together for you. So it depends on, in my opinion, letting the rate increases that are in the code book right now stand, and going with the cart system, we get to that $540,000 by 2020. But if we don't, the further we hold off going to carts, the further we slide and the longer it's going to take to get to that level. And that is where the rate increases would come into effect to try and meet that same level by 2020. If the Assembly, which is completely up to the Assembly, wants to see us achieve that level sooner, then we'll have to raise rates sooner. But my take on it, my proposal to the Assembly is to let those rates that are currently in the code book stand, and let's get there over time.
Does that answer your question,
Yes.
Bob? Any other questions or discussion on this ordinance? I guess if anybody wants to change any particular part of the ordinance, we'll have to do it by an amendment, to amend the motion. Otherwise, we vote for it, it moves forward through the second reading like proposed by the staff.
I have one more question for Carl, if I could. Carl, it's a rhetorical one, but it's a question I keep getting asked several times, or twice today, in fact, before I came here. You put it in print, but the obvious question is, will you need to hire more staff to work at the baler and on collection routes with the cart plan?
The answer is no. I did quite a bit of research into staffing levels, what our customer load is per day on weekdays. It depends on, of course, if we do reduce the hours at the baler and landfill, eliminate the morning hours. That frees up at least one staff member to be available to collect material with the more efficient method that is provided by an automated truck. I'm very confident after looking at the numbers and our customer load that we can get the work done with existing staff without any additional hires. And this will continue into the future.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this? I have a question, Carl. During the summer when the canneries are busy, if we don't have the baler open in the morning, is that going to affect their delivery of garbage to the facility?
Rarely do we see more than one delivery per day. If the facility's open at all, I believe that they will adjust their delivery schedule to meet when we're open.
Okay. And that is a question that I've been asked by the public, and a question I have myself. If this moves forward, I'd hate to see an increase in staff because we suddenly realize that we can't cover this system that we have.
Right, that's understood. The numbers, I was surprised when I looked at the numbers of customers that we see during the weekdays. We did an audit and took a week from different times of the year, and one of them was right in the middle of the summer fishing season. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing anywhere from 10 to 15 customers a day visiting the baler, and that includes commercial customers. We just don't have a very big customer load up there. So pushing a few customers to the afternoon seems worthwhile when we're looking at saving money overall in our budget and achieving the reserve level that we need to. It's been mandated by the Assembly.
Okay. Any other discussion? I guess I'll just make one more comment for the public. If it's this hot topic, if this is that big of a hot topic, it'd be nice if people would come and participate in the public hearing so we get more input to make our decisions on. I don't know how many times I've said this. It doesn't seem to reach the ears of the public, though. So if there's no more comments, we will have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Mayor, may I make one more comment, please?
Sure, Kurt.
Hey, would it be appropriate to table this for one more meeting so we could maybe see if we could get some more comments, or do we have to stay on a schedule?
This is the start of the whole budget, so we started early so we wouldn't run into any delays, and we'd have more time to discuss it. I don't know that we need to table it, but people could still come and comment at the next meeting on the 16th. I got the day right this time, under views related to the agenda. So if you want to make a motion to table it, we'll see if you get a second. That's up to you.
Well, it just seems like, I have a few questions yet that are kind of unanswered. I know it sounds like it's, the increase in garbage rates is imminent, but is it a greater increase if we stick with the blue bag, or is it less of an increase if we go to the cans? And these are kind of some questions I think that need to be kind of fleshed out. And like you say, I'd like to hear more comments from, like I've been getting a dozen or two comments. That seems to be the big topic with everybody in town, every time somebody stops and talks to me. So it just seems like there's still a lot of questions, and I don't know if there's any opposition. So maybe what I'll do then is I'll make a motion that we table it for one more meeting, so maybe we can get some more comments for a second reading next meeting, and I'll just see if I get a second. If not, I'm okay. I can move forward.
Okay, so if you wanted to move it to table it to a time certain, that would be April 6th at noon. Easter Monday isn't a holiday, is it?
Well, I was thinking, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with the Assembly, how about the 16th, this next meeting? And if we don't get any comments from people that actually want to show up, then I think we just need to move forward and keep going.
Well, let me ask Kathy a question. Can we have two public hearings on one ordinance?
You most certainly can.
Okay, well, let's schedule it for another public hearing on the 16th, so we'll just keep it moving forward. Does that work for you, Kurt?
That works for me, so I make a motion that we table it until the 16th.
I don't know that you'd have to do that if we just open it up for another public hearing on the 16th, and if you don't like what you, just my opinion, see at that time you could table it, you know, the third reading to the first meeting in April.
Okay, I mean, I don't want to kick this can too far down the road. I just, you know, when I get home, I'm going to be a little more diligent and maybe nail Carl down, and maybe he can let me know what his projections are. So, depending on which direction we go with the blue bags or the cans. So, okay, well, thanks, Mark. I don't mean to prolong this meeting.
No, that's fine. So, do you still want to make a motion to table this? I mean,
yes, I do.
Okay, and you want to make a motion to table the second reading until the first meeting in April. Kathy.
How about rather than table, how about he just make a motion to have a second public hearing at the third reading on March 16th?
That's what I was trying to...
Yes, that's what I'd like to do.
Okay, so we don't need a motion to table it, then we'll have another public hearing, and if you don't like the outcome of that, then you could postpone, you know, table the third reading, if you still want to garner more information. Does that make sense?
No, I think giving the public enough time to weigh in on it, and then I think we really need to keep moving forward.
Okay, and you get home soon?
I'll be home on the 15th, but I'll be doing a lot of research between now and then.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments?
I hate to do it, but point of clarification.
Yes.
Just so on the 16th, it'll be a second public reading, but it'll also, or second public hearing, but also it'll also be the third reading at the same time, like the third and final reading at the same time.
Correct. So if there are any changes
Correct.
to the, yes.
Thank you.
Did I make it more confusing than it needed to be?
I don't know. Might just be me, but either way, I got it now. I'm good.
I can do that sometimes. So, okay. So, is there any more discussion on the second reading of Ordinance 2015-06, ordinance adopting the budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016?
Oh.
We're not there. Hang on a minute. We're up here.
Yeah, sorry.
Second reading of Ordinance 2015-04, an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2015 budget for known changes. It's the second reading. Any more discussion? There's public comments over. Sorry. We're going to have another public hearing, though, on this at the next meeting. You have two chances at the next meeting. Now I'm getting confused, which is easy. All right. Any more discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
On the amendment, yes?
I don't know that we amended. Well, we...
No, you're right, on the original.
Is that...
On the amendment.
Okay, amendment to make another public hearing.
Correct.
Okay, we'll do that. Another
Okay.
public hearing on the third reading for this ordinance. That's what we're voting on, the amendment to have another public hearing. Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
No.
John?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Okay, if that was everybody, the vote is 6-1 with Member Lagadakis voting not in favor of the amendment. So it looks like we'll have a second public hearing on this ordinance, and now we will vote, if there's no more discussion, on the ordinance as amended.
Bob?
No.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
No.
John?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Okay, so it passes. Was there 3 negative votes, I believe?
Yes.
So the clerk has that recorded. So ordinance 2015-04 passes in its second reading. On the third reading, we will have a second public hearing. Okay, new business. Ordinance 2015-03, an ordinance providing for a new chapter 9.16 nuisances, the first reading. I'll entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Haverlick to adopt ordinance 2015-03 in its first reading. So ordinance about nuisances. Any discussion? Kurt? Any input?
No discussion here for me.
Okay, clerk call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2015-03 passes in its first reading. Now we're on to ordinance 2015-05, an ordinance providing for increases in short-term and transient mortgage fees and establishing fees for the use of the commercial drive-down dock. I'll entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
For a second? Second. It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Haverlick to adopt ordinance 2015-05 in its first reading. Discussion. And this was proposed by the Harbor Board. Cindy?
Mr. Mayor, I believe this was the one that we received a letter from Dave Berg.
Correct. Amendment to change the language.
To add passengers.
And
I'm trying to see which section that falls in, and I'm not.
Claude, can you point it out to us in the ordinance so we could find the right paragraph and such?
Yeah, you bet. It's not actually in the ordinance. It's
Okay.
in the draft procedures.
Okay.
A.I. It's between crew and stores. He'd like passengers.
So is that, just through the mayor, is that just a policy thing that needs to be discussed by the Harbor Board?
That sounds good. We talked about it.
Okay.
Sure, no problem. We can do
And it
that.
makes sense that passengers,
Yeah.
can be
Okay.
loaded and offloaded there, so. Okay, any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Kurt?
Underneath this draft here, underneath who can use it, section 1, I guess, or I, loading and unloading of gear, cargo, provisions, crew, storage, etc. by all boats. Would that fit under that category?
Right.
All boats it does, but passengers, I can't see.
This crew.
Yeah, that's where he was talking.
Right.
And no big
Okay.
deal. Yeah, we can
Okay.
add passengers to that list.
So, I mean, this is just, I guess, part of the harbor's policy for managing the facility. It's not in the ordinance.
Right, it's not in the ordinance. We just wanted to give you a little background on where we are, just kind of rules of the road of using that new facility.
Okay. So any more discussion on this ordinance? Bob?
Mr. Mayor, on item A4, I think it is, I think that down there where you, under where you're talking about municipal harbor, I think you really need to put an S on that. You're talking about all the harbors, I think, not just one of them. It's just a
What section is that under?
A4 under, annual under A4. Yeah, it's a new item that was added under 4.
And that's
Highlighted.
under the
On the ordinance
in the
itself.
ordinance. So you're going to make a motion to change that? Or?
Yes, just to added, change harbor to harbors. I believe you're talking about all the harbors.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you for catching that.
Okay, just make it plural. Do we have to make an amendment to do that, or should we just add an S?
I can handle it.
Okay. It seems like an easier way. Okay, any more discussion on this ordinance in its first reading? It's ordinance 2015-05. It's new rate increases for transient and short-term mortgage and fees for using our new drive-down dock, which is almost complete. Quick update on that?
Yeah, it looks like hopefully in 2 weeks we should be using it. Fingers crossed.
Okay.
And just one other little thing, because I know John is interested, but the crane arrived today. Hallelujah. Oh, God.
Okay, good. So if there's no more discussion by the assembly, we'll vote on this in its first reading. Will the clerk call the roll?
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, passes unanimously in its first reading. That brings us to ordinance 2015-06, an ordinance adopting the budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2015 through June 30th of 2016. I'll entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance.
I'll second.
Moved by member Strand, seconded by member Lagadakis to adopt ordinance 2015-06 in its first reading. Discussion? And this is another opportunity to amend parts of the budget if anyone so desires. Any more discussion? Seeing none. Can't see Kurt if he's raising his hand, but he's not talking. So clerk, call the roll.
John,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Okay, the first reading of ordinance 2015-06, adopting next year's fiscal year budget, passes. Next item on the agenda is resolution 2015-03, a resolution creating a local marijuana regulatory advisory committee. And we've asked people to put their name in. We solicited for names, and before we can appoint a committee, we have to adopt a resolution to form the committee. So that's what we're doing here. Entertain a motion to adopt this resolution to form the Marijuana Regulation Advisory Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by member Greger, seconded by member Strand to adopt resolution 2015-03. So, any discussion? What I would like to do, with the approval of the assembly, there's 16 names now?
Yes.
People have put their names in. For them to all be appointed, and what we need to do, I'll just read this, Kathy put this together for me, but I was curious, and we think that because the appointment of the local marijuana regulation advisory committee may result in recommendations on local legislative matters, I firmly believe it important that these individuals possess the same qualifications to be elected to public advisory office in Petersburg. It is my recommendation that all individuals that have expressed interest to serve on the committee prior to this meeting and who qualify to serve be appointed to the committee. Determination of each appointee's qualifications to hold office will be determined by formal letter from the clerk's office. The appointment and qualification date will be today, March 2nd, 2015. And criteria to qualify is you need to be a qualified voter of the Petersburg Borough who has been a resident of the borough for at least 1 year and who has requested to vote in Petersburg by January 31st, 2015. So that'll be pretty self-explanatory when we send out a questionnaire to the 16 people that have expressed interest. Also, there was a couple of assembly members that expressed interest in being on this board. Member Strand and Member Greger, I believe. Are you still interested in?
Yes, and I thought member Wolfeter was as well.
Kurt, are you interested in being on the Marijuana Advisory Board?
Roger that.
Okay, there'll be 3 of you. That brings it up to 19 people. Odd number, but it's just an advisory board. And I would like to appoint, without any opposition, to be the chair of this board, Member Greger. Does that work for everybody?
That works fine for me.
Okay, we need to have a chairperson. Couple of, did you have some specifics you wanted the committee to address, Bob?
Yeah, I did. I had a couple questions. First of all, first question for you, is the intent now, once we select this, that we're going to close the window for people soliciting for people on the committee after today?
How long have we solicited names? I think it's been 3 weeks. It's been quite a while.
Last meeting, yeah.
And it's been discussed since November.
I would agree that it probably we've had a month. We probably need to close it and go
If
with
that's good with the assembly, then today is the appointment day. One thing I think that that Petersburg needs to do is define public places like the state has and Unalaska has done, just to get on board that train. Another thing we need to do, and we have quite a bit of time to do this, it's 9 months for the legislature to come up with their plans and a year before you can even apply for a permit, I believe.
May 2016.
Yeah, so it's a ways off, but I think Petersburg needs to form a local regulatory authority, and I think if that isn't done, we might not be eligible to get taxes from the state when they collect it, from people who file for permits. And my opinion on that board, authority, whatever you want to call it, you know, if there's a proper term to receive the funds, and we need to come up with that term, what it needs to be, but that could be, in my opinion, the seated assembly, like we already do the Board of Equalization for property tax disputes. We could, you know, the committee could go through that, and, you know, since there's such a big number on the committee, they form subcommittees and do whatever they need to do to garner information to bring back to us. So, any other discussion? I'll quit talking.
Yeah, I've had a couple emails from people. One of them that I'd like to see that committee address. One of them is people are really concerned about where we would allow these establishments, yeah, in Petersburg, and it should be part of the zoning, I think. And but I think the committee needs to address it. I've got at least two emails on that. The other one, I've got an email also from people asking, would you please define a public place? I know that they failed to do that in the emergency regulations in the state, and they're supposed to come back to that issue, but it wouldn't hurt to address that one. And the third one I've got from folks is the issue, and I think one of the folks that put their name in talked about it, was secondhand smoke, is that if you're sitting in your backyard and it's going over, drift over to the neighbors, is that secondhand smoke? That people are concerned about, and I think the committee just needs to address the issues.
Okay, valid points. Yeah. Any other discussion? And one thing the committee can use, in my opinion, is the Marijuana Act passed by the voters in November. It has a lot of guidelines down there, and I wrote down, it was like, starts at chapter 38, section 1738, and then it jumps up to the 40s, but had some good information. And I think the state has described public places, haven't they? Didn't the
their emergency regulation failed to do that? They were going.
I thought the alcohol board was just.
The alcohol board put an emergency regulation. They did everything but do that. Well, I just seen. I read it yesterday. It was not.
Okay.
Not
well, it's coming down the pike anyway.
Yeah, hopefully.
So. Anyway, any other discussion on the formation of this committee, Marijuana Regulation Advisory Committee? Okay. Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call for the roll on the resolution 2015-03.
John?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
We're voting on the resolution. Kurt, are you still with us?
Yeah, you did. There was just a little glitch there. Okay, so my name came up. Yes.
So yes?
Yes.
Thank
Yes
you.
was your vote?
Yes, I'm voting on yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Thank you.
So resolution 2015-03 passes unanimously, and I guess the committee just needs to decide when they're going to meet. And there will be public meetings, I would assume, advertised. So next resolution is 2015-04, a resolution in support of transferring management of the skate park facility at the ball field to the Petersburg Little League. Entertain a motion to adopt this resolution. For a second.
Second.
The motion has been made by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Lynn, to adopt resolution 2015-04. Discussion? Any discussion?
I mean, yeah, I guess if I may. This is one I would definitely hope people turn out and speak on. I know, quote unquote, public skating's been on been in this assembly discussion in the past. I think Mr. Briner is correct that it's an underused facility. And the flip side is, I think there's also a certain population that uses it a lot. In short, I'm going to vote for it in its first reading today, but I really hope people turn out and speak on this particular issue.
Actually,
it only has one reading.
Only one?
Yeah, resolution would pass this. And,
it's on an ordinance.
Donnie, could you explain the situation, please?
Yeah, but I get that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things involved. My personal opinion is that the youth, the adults that skate here in this community deserve a skate park. They deserve a good skate park. Over the last few weeks, I've spent a lot of time researching that specific topic, and as I look at our specific skate park, I do not believe that it falls under a safe or a good skate park that is deserving of the kids that use it right now. There's a lot of issues that I've kind of laid out for you in my memo, and those are really big concerns for me. It doesn't cost us a lot to insure it. Really, actually, doesn't affect our insurance at all. But from a standpoint of liability, there are so many issues with the actual structure itself that I'm concerned that if there was an injury on that facility, that it would be pretty easy for our insurance carrier to say, I'm sorry, but as far as things go, there's issues about how high up the cement is, there's issues about protection of the I-beams and the I-beams not being protected where they're right up against one of the half pipes, to the actual fact that it wasn't designed by a certified skate park engineer, to the fact that the actual equipment itself that was purchased isn't actually made for the place that's built. So there's just a lot of issues that are actually problems there. The expectation that I have is that we do move forward with this agreement with Little League. We turn that facility over to Little League, let it get a lot of use out of the Little League program. And then we search diligently, and I mean diligently, to be able to provide a good quality skate park for our community. And I just do not believe that the skate park that we have right now fits that mold.
Okay, John?
I agree 100% with Donnie. The skate park in its present design is a hazard and it's a liability, and it's one I don't think we should participate in anymore. And again, the baseball kids could use it and turn it into more of a safe facility, and a couple hundred can use it rather than just a few that right now you've got a slide going into an I-beam, at least in one area, and it's very dangerous. So I'm very in favor of this motion.
Okay, any other discussion? When this was first presented to us, and I just can't find it, it's not on my fingertips right now, but wasn't it proposed that the Little League and the high school baseball teams were going to take over the maintenance of the whole field infrastructure? Is that still part of this?
That is not, yes and no. Yes, that is the discussion that we're having right now with Little League. That'll take us a while to really be able to get that into place, because there's still some issues that we're going to need to work out between the two groups. And it's still, we need to make sure that it's beneficial for Little League and also for the borough. But it's definitely something that Parks and Recreation is moving forward with. But this is separate from that specific discussion. It will come into play at the very end once we look at an actual lease for the Little League, for the fields, and also for that piece of equipment. But otherwise, right now, we're just looking at just the skate park.
Because if that was to take place, that would actually take a financial burden a little bit off of the borough, which, if they could afford to do that, those two entities, that would be great, because with the fiscal situation around the country/state and trickling down to us.
Yeah, one of the things that Steve has asked me to do is to proactively find ways to cut another $50,000 from Parks and Recreation's budget this next year. So not the year coming up July 1st, but the following July 1st. And so because of that, one of the ways in which we do that is actually cutting a position in the parks maintenance department, and then also relieving ourselves of the actual maintenance costs that are associated with taking and maintaining those fields.
Okay, thank you. That makes me feel better about moving forward with this. So, any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes. So resolution 2015-04 passes unanimously. The next resolution on the agenda is 2015-05. A resolution in support of Governor Walker's proposed fiscal year 2016 revenue sharing program appropriation of $57 million. I'll entertain a motion to support that.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Strand to issue support for Governor Walker's proposed 2016 revenue sharing program appropriation of $57 million. Discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, resolution 2015-05 passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is consideration of a special use permit for Heather Island Incorporated. We'll entertain a motion to issue that special use permit.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Member Greger, seconded by Member Lynn to approve a special use permit for Heather Island Incorporated. And what it is, Carl, do you have an opinion on this, since it's kind of tied to one of your streets?
Mr. Mayor, yes, I'm in support of this special use permit. A lot of the conditions that I came up with are incorporated into the permit itself. Liz and the Planning Commission approved those and recommended to forward all those conditions to the Assembly.
Okay, and it looks like in the agreement that the land could be taken back if it was ever going to be turned into a right-of-way for Ira 2 Street or whatever it would potentially be. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Isn't it in the agreement that the land could be taken back by the borough if they need it for future, like if they ever put a right-of-way in there?
Yes, the answer is yes. I didn't draft the permit. Liz did, so.
Sorry, thank you. Any other discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Okay, we have issued the special use permit for Heather Island Incorporated. Next item on the agenda is consideration of Icicle Seafood's letter of request asking for borough assistance to cover $32,000 in electrical transformer replacement. I'll entertain a motion for that consideration.
So move.
Is there a second?
You'll second it. Yeah.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Haverlick to consider the request of Icicle Seafoods to help pay for a transformer at their facility. Just to add for the public, PFI suffered the failure of one of their power transformers last season. Petersburg Municipal Power and Light assisted in the specification and purchase of a replacement unit and ultimately purchased the unit to ensure prompt delivery and best price. While waiting for delivery of the new unit, Petersburg Municipal Power and Light made a spare transformer available to get them through the season without interruption. The new unit was subsequently received and installed, and the spare unit returned to our warehouse. PFI was invoiced for the purchase price of the new unit in order to reimburse Petersburg Municipal Power and Light. However, because they are our largest customer, they have now asked that the reimbursement be forgiven. I can find nothing in our code that would allow for this support. I recommend that their request be denied and that the reimbursement be made, and that is by our Power and Light Superintendent. So, any other discussion?
Question, if I may.
Sure.
Joe, just besides this letter, which seems fairly clear, is there anything else you'd like to add to with that, or anything else that you feel is relevant?
There was one thing that may be relevant. Just recently, within the last couple of months, Trident Seafoods also needed a new transformer, increased a larger one because they anticipate more freezing load, and they purchased it themselves. So if we approve this, then we'd probably have to go back and revisit that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I just have a question. Is this how it's usually done? Or I guess...
Nancy, these transformers belong to the customer.
Uh-huh.
They're not Power and Light transformers. And so if they fail or if they need bigger ones, whatever, it's at their expense.
Any more questions or discussion? Patrick, would you like to make a comment? I'll allow it, but I mean, appropriately would have been earlier, but that's fine.
I'm not a great public speaker, but
Me either. I'm working on it.
and I've always stayed, again, Patrick Wilson, plant manager at Petersburg Fisheries. I've been there about 26 years now, and I just know a lot of you from over the years. I've been up here a few times. It is true we did have a failure. The transformer was tested to show that it was failing, and we worked with Joe and his department, which was great, to get it replaced. We spent over $100,000 to let you know. Joe did provide us with a backup transformer in the meantime while we waited for the new one to arrive. It was also an insurance company required that we had a backup transformer years ago, and we confirmed that the city did have one. I think it either required it when you were here or Dennis was here. The history of us at that plant, we've worked quite closely with the city departments or the borough departments. And when Dennis Lewis was in charge at that time before Joe came on board, we had a major upgrade there with the power lines that service our building and TU, and we worked with the city. We shared some of the expense, and the city shared some of the expense of doing that upgrade. It was overhead power lines that came down from up the hill there by the I think the cable company, and now they're underground. And at that time, we had transformers located up on a power pole platform and whatnot. The city at that time picked up part of the cost, and we also picked up part of it. It was a fairly large upgrade. It benefited us. It benefited the city at that time, and it was kind of a win-win for everybody. This year, we're doing another $100,000 upgrade to provide service to a couple of our machines we're installing. We're spending about $500,000 there. Our plant has spent about $6 million in the last 5 or 6 years on upgrades. We've increased production at the plant significantly, brought in a lot more fish revenue to this community. We've spent a lot of money on taxes. I'd like to see a little more give from the city, or the borough that is, provide us a little bit more. We don't ask for a lot usually. We're a good community sponsor, I think, and I just feel it's time that we got a little bit back from what we paid into the community here. We have, expect a huge season this year. I think 2 years ago we had that large season. Our payroll was about $15 million. We spent a lot of money in town. Our employees spent a lot of money, and I just like to see a little more coming back from what we give into the community and the borough here. And that's basically all I'm asking. And also, this year is our 50th anniversary. So if you don't agree with that standpoint, you can give it to us as the anniversary present.
Thank you, Patrick. Any questions of Patrick?
He wasn't a good speaker.
Any more discussion on this request for funding for the transformer replacement for bicycle? John?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think Patrick...
Hold on.
Joe's recommendation?
Joe's recommendation was not to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, John.
Oh, no, that's no problem. I like, Kurt speaks better than I do anyway. But PFI has done an awful lot for the community, and they are, they always are first there for fundraisers and the fireman's breakfast, and they are an important asset to the community. But I do think it'd be a bad precedent to set to buy equipment for any company in town. So I'd have to go along with Joe and pass on it.
Okay. Any other discussion? I think I will probably vote in the negative of this as well, even though hopefully it doesn't affect my market with Icicle. Probably not. I'm not much of a producer anyway, but they do a lot for the town, and the only reason I won't vote in favor of this is just because then, like, if Trident needs a transformer, we're going to be buying their equipment too. So just to clarify why I'm going to vote like I am. Nancy?
I'm worried about the precedent as well. So.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? If not, will the clerk? Yeah, go ahead, Kurt.
One last little quick comment there. That's my take on this all too. Is I just don't want to set the precedent. So yeah, I concur with what you guys are saying there.
Okay, it might be of a different attitude if we were hemorrhaging money, but that doesn't appear like it's the case. So anyway, will the clerk call the roll?
Nancy?
No.
Mark?
No.
Kurt?
No.
Cindy?
No.
Bob?
No.
Jay?
Nope.
John?
No.
Okay, so we have voted unanimously to not consider the request from Icicle Seafoods. Communications, we have a letter from Dane Roundtree. I won't read it, but I can give you just what the gist of it is. He just wrote a letter asking that this assembly basically says we'll never get rid of the senior sales tax exemption and tax benefits for the, the elderly in the community. And, we've had a vote on that. The public did the last election, and I think none of the benefits to the elderly were taken away, but us as an assembly can't make a decision for a future assembly. So thanks for the letter, Dane. Just wanted to let you know that I have read it, and we talked about it at the meeting. Next item is assembly discussion items. Recognitions, we've already went through that unless something else popped up in somebody's mind. Sandy.
Sorry. So I'd just like to thank Airlift Northwest. They co-sponsored our EMT2 class. We had 11 individuals spend about 30 hours last week recertifying as EMT2s, so that alleviated our training budget. So thanks to Airlift Northwest.
Thanks, Sandy. Was there many new participants in this?
No, it was just a recert class.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other recognitions by anybody? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is discussion of visits to Juneau with our state delegation and to Washington, D.C. with our national delegation. Is there any more input by any of the assembly members? John?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I had two comments. One was Jonathan Christ Tompkins was here this past weekend, and I think one of his descriptions of what's going on in Juneau was the best when I asked him how the legislation and the funding and all that's going. He says he kind of feels like a pallbearer at a funeral. And we were there and talked to the different commissioners, and Governor Walker, I think, is doing an admirable job, and will. That's kind of how I felt. And the thing is, it was also reminiscent of an awful lot of chaos. Like we were seeing, one day you were given money, the next day you were taken away, and the next day you were given part of it back. And it kind of reminds me of a large family that all of a sudden lost 2/3, 3/4 of their income, but they refuse to change their lifestyle because it's too important. Everything's too important. But, so they're spending their rainy day funds, which is exactly what we're doing as a state, and hopefully not as a borough. That was all I had.
Okay. Any other discussion or comments about the fiscal situation in Juneau and Washington? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, it's adjourned.